Hello, my name is McMahon. I live and work at the intersection of employment and disability. Let's begin with some of the legal issues so that we can move quickly to some of the fun stuff. We'll start with the rumors about the flood of litigation that awaits you under the Americans with Disabilities Act and some of its recent amendments. As an employer, precisely what are your risks for ADA litigation? We're going to chat about both federal lawsuits as well as allegations brought through the EEOC. We'll use the year 2006 for an example. In that year, 240,000 civil lawsuits were filed in the federal courts, and of that number, about 30,000 involved matters of civil rights. Think about that as our neighborhood. Of that number, 14,000 pertain to employment. Think about that as the block that we live on. So 14,000 employment matters. Now, of that number, 10% or 1,400 related specifically to matters of disability, the ADA. That's our wheelhouse. And of that 1,400, only 50 went all the way to trial and verdict. The rest ended in dismissal, consent decrees, arbitration, default, some form of settlement. Only 3.6% went all the way through the trial process. 50 actual trials completed, that in a workforce of 140 million Americans. Is it fair, then, to refer to that as a flood of litigation? Let's put it in some perspective. There's 6 million American businesses. 2.5 million employ more than one person. Suppose you own such a business and it has 1,000 workers. Congratulations, by the way. You're bigger than 97% of all U.S. employers. Now, an ADA lawsuit will be filed against you about every century. You'll actually go to trial every 3,000 years. And if you do, you'll prevail 95% of the time. So what's the probability of receiving an EEOC allegation under the ADA? Has to be more likely than a trial, right? You'd be right. Each month, the EEOC receives between 1,000 and 2,500 allegations under the ADA. That means if you employed that 1,000-person workforce, you would see an allegation about every 7 years. And unlike a trial, you wouldn't prevail 95% of the time. If history is any predictor, you would prevail about 75% of the time. That's still pretty good. Now remember, our figures are tied to that benchmark of 1,000 workers. That's a big company. If you employ fewer, if you employ more than 1,000, you'd have to adjust those proportions accordingly. I think by now you can tell I'm no big fan of that term, flood of litigation. I find it somewhat hysterical.
We have looked at into business model as a justification for improving workplaces to accommodate more people. The payback period was less than 1 year. In some cases, it was about 6-7 months. So in other words, whatever they spent, they recovered their expenses in less than 6-7 months' time. They found that the productivity went up. They found that quality went up, quality of products. And they found that the injuries went down.